Hello and welcome to What's on the Shelf. I'm your host Chen, and today before the box, we're with my colleague here. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Clay Capra, and I'm currently the sales director for Leader Games. So, yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, Jen.
Well, thank you so much for coming. So I guess I'll get straight into the questions. So, what was your first experience in board games?
That's a fun one. That's kind of a fun question. So, my very first experience with gaming was probably the basic Dungeons and Dragons box set that was published in 1981. So, my it was actually my dad, really kind of on a whim, purchased that and kind of tried to play it once, and I was absolutely fascinated, and it's basically become a lifelong hobby for me since then. So that's really kind of how I started in the very early '80s with Dungeons and Dragons. I was really into role playing games when I was young, and I also fondly remember Steve Jackson Games was publishing these little micro games. Ogre was one of them, and so I was really kind of into that kind of stuff as well. So that's kind of the earliest memories I have of getting started in gaming. Yeah.
So did you have a different career before the current career you have now?
Yeah. I basically I can kind of tell you my brief history in gaming. So when I in college I had a degree in entrepreneurship. One of my partners in college, we talked all the time about, oh, we're going to open a game store. And so we basically just kind of dreamed and talked about that a lot. And I did actually do that shortly after college. I did open, so I was the owner and operator of a game store. I had, it was just, I have so many good memories from that time. And that was actually at the time that Pokemon came out. So I remember I remember going to the game store one morning and there was a line of kids waiting to get in before we opened, and I was like, "What is going on?" And it was from Pokemon. And so anyway, just kind of having some nervous. So yeah, so I did the game store thing for about 3 years, and then the other business I've been in as a family business is insurance, and so that's my dad's a big insurance agent, so I've kind of been in the insurance business as well. But I really gained some good, valuable sales skills there. So I've sold insurance for many years as well. I also, while I was in insurance, I would kind of dream about being in the game industry again, right? And so I would sometimes check job postings from Hasbro or Games Workshop and stuff like that. And I ended up deciding to go for it. And I interviewed with Games Workshop and I became a store manager for them. And so that was kind of where I went back from insurance back to gaming, working with Games Workshop. And so I had a great time working with Games Workshop. I have nothing but good things to say about them. However, for me, I had a family and everything at the time, and I was working lots of nights and weekends, right, at retail. So lots of nights and weekends that started to drag on me a little bit. So eventually, I got out of that, and I ended up working with Legion Supplies, and Legion Supplies makes they're known for making Magic the Gathering card sleeves and Magic the Gathering card boxes and holders and stuff like that. So I worked for friends with Steve, the owner there, and it was there. I was at Gen Con with Legion Supplies, and a friend of mine, Patrick, leader, was also at that Gen Con, and Patrick was kind of showing off early prototype of Crystal Caverns. And just because Patrick was a friend, I knew who he was. I made a point of going and saying hi to Patrick after the exhibit hall closed. And little did I know, a year later, the very next year, I would be demoing for Patrick for Leader Games at the next Gen Con. And that was 2016. So and the year after that, I was hired in 2017. I was hired full time as a salesperson with Leader Games. So that's kind of my whole history there.
Oh, that's amazing.
Gaming industry. Yeah, yeah. That's the whole history for gaming. So Obviously, I have a deep burning passion for games, and I just really believe that games have the ability to change our world for the better. It's a great way to bring people together. I believe it can just be a real positive experience in general. So yeah,
So, for newcomers to the industry, what kind of advice would you give to them for breaking into it?
that's a great question. All right, so I actually wrote a blog post about this, and so I'll give you 5 rock solid tips on how to get in the game industry if you want.
Awesome.
All right, so the first tip is to check job postings often and apply. All right, so what you're going to want to do is make a list of the game companies that you would like to work for, and then go to their websites and see if you can find if they do have a career or job section of their website. Then bookmark that, right? And then just get in the habit of checking it often, because it's just a matter of time, and there's going to be a job posting that's perfect fit for you in the future. That's kind of what I did way back. How I got the job with Games Workshop is I would go to their website and I would check job postings, and eventually I I can admit back then I was not mobile. I live in Minnesota. I was not to move, and so there was a lot of job postings from Hasbro and Games Workshop all over the country. But one night, late at night, there was opening a store in Minnesota. My heart skipped a beat, and I was like, I've got to apply for this. And so that's what I mean. So check job postings often. The next thing that I highly recommend that people do is volunteer at game conventions to help game companies. Okay, that can be really important. What that is going to do, almost every game company I know would love and is looking for volunteers to help them at conventions. So if you contact them very nicely and say, hey, I would love to help out at the next, whatever convention that is. If you do that, it just gives you a great opportunity to meet people and get to know some of the people that work at the different companies. And that's going to be invaluable just to get to know them a little bit. It really goes a long way. So, highly recommend that you would do that. And my third tip, and this is probably the most important one, and that is that you've got to make the decision that you're going to work and make a living in the game industry no matter what. I really mean that. You have to fully commit. And what I have you I'm sure I assume you know who Peter Dinklage is,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's the actor from he was in Game of Thrones and all that. So Peter Dinklage gave a commencement speech to the class of 2012 at Bennington College, which is where Peter Dinklage graduated from. And that speech is on YouTube. So if anyone searches for, and I could give you a link, Jen, if you search for the Peter Dinklage uh, address, Bennington College class of 2012. In that speech, he talks about how once he graduated from college, he bounced around, he kind of drifted from job to job. Now, you talk about breaking into the game industry. Imagine how difficult it would be to break into Hollywood, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if that was your aspiration, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to break into Hollywood. And Peter just has an absolute wonderful speech about how he reached a point in his life where he decided he was going to be an actor no matter what. And he was going to be a paid actor. And he just kept trying and trying, and eventually got a very small part in a play or something like that. But it was a paying job for being an actor. And so he did that, and that led to another one, and that led to another one, and that one led to another one. And eventually he became famous. We all know who Peter Dinklage is.
Exactly.
But that is just super inspiring. So I'd recommend anyone watch that video, and it will inspire you. And it just kind of shows you the type of if you just make that decision that no matter what, that's what you're going to do, you can make it happen. So I highly recommend that. The next thing you can do is you want to consider your skills, right? You want to look at yourself. What are your skills? Because in the game industry, there's lots of different things you can do, and you have to bring something to the table for a game company, right? So some examples: accounting. You could be an accountant and have a passion for board games, and guess what? Game companies need a good accountant. They need a good financial person. You could be really good at graphic design, right? And so game companies really need graphic designers. So that's another thing you can do. Maybe you're an artist, you're really good at artwork and illustration. You can do that. Maybe you're like me. Maybe you have a sales background and you're good at sales. You can do that. Maybe you're really good at social media and promotion. You can go into marketing. So I would think about your own personal skill set and what you can bring to the table for a game company. That's going to be important as well. And whatever you kind of like or whatever you're kind of good at, just be aware of that and build those skills so that you have something to bring to the table. Is that, I don't know, hopefully that makes sense.
No, it does make sense.
And then last, yeah, you gotta have an angle, right? You gotta have something you're good at to bring to the game companies. And then lastly, it would be up your game when it comes to cover letters and resume writing, right? So I have personally looked at resumes and cover letters that have come into the game companies, and some of them stand out, some of them don't. So just brush up on your basic skills there. Don't just take that for granted when it does come time to apply. So anyway, those are my 5 tips for getting a job in the game industry. And I wrote a blog post about it. It's at claycapra.com. So you can go there and check it out. I'd be happy to give you I've got the link to Peter Dinklage's video in there. And
Perfect. No, I'll definitely check it out and add it post as well. So from your experience, what is the hardest part of your particular job?
Well, the hardest part of my job, well, I can tell you the one thing I don't like about my job is the commute. So I have almost an hour commute to the office now. I've been working from home the last few months, so that hasn't mattered. But that's what I don't like about my job. What the hardest part is, let me think about that just for a little bit. I don't know. I mean, maybe just kind of keeping up with everything that's going on. Maybe, yeah, I can't think of too much. I mean, I truly do love my job. So there's not too much that I look at and say, oh, that's really tough. Have to do that. But so there isn't anything super, super tough like that. But every job has its moments, right? Even if it's a job that you love. So.
So let me see here. So at the end of the day, when is your favorite moments from your career?
Sure. I'm really happy to talk about this. There's, I'll probably share a couple of memories that for me just were the most insane, impactful. Gen Con of 2016 was where Crystal Caverns was debuting. And we were there demoing the game. And I think it was after the first day, it was getting kind of late into the evening, and we were kind of at that point where, what should we do? What are we going to do? Let's go play a game or something. And we were wandering around one of the hotels. And we were several levels up. We were like 3 or 4 levels up, and we could see, I can't remember the name of the hotel off the top of my head, but you could look down and see several stories down the floor where people are. And we could see that somebody was playing Vasta Crystal Caverns. And we're like, oh, someone's playing Crystal Caverns. Oh, cool. Let's go down and see who they are. Maybe we can help them play, whatever. So we went down there, and it turned out to be Tom Bassel and the Dice Tower crew.
Oh, wow.
Was setting up and about to play Vasta Crystal Caverns. So we went up to him, started talking to him, and I got to meet Tom Bassel. This is me meeting Tom for the very first time. So I have a picture of, basically just standing next to him and whatnot. And Patrick, the founder, actually ran a demo for them in the hotel, and then the next day, Tom mentioned they were doing like a live from Gen Con podcast, and Tom just mentioned Vasta Crystal Caverns during that podcast, and it was like that sent a wave to our booth, like within minutes, people started coming up to the booth, and it was kind of a surreal experience from there. We went on to sell out of all the games we had brought, and it was just an unbelievable experience at that Gen Con 2016. And then the next most memorable moment of my career was Gen Con 2018 and this was the Gen Con where Root debuted. where we were selling it for the very first time. So it was right when the exhibit hall opened. We thought we might, because there was a little bit of buzz leading into the convention, but of course you're never sure. And right when the exhibit hall opened, a line queued up, and we had a terrible booth placement. We were against the wall, all the way in one end,
Oh,
and
wow.
we ended up having this big line that formed. It seemed like it was a block long along the wall for our booth, and I was actually running cash register for the as that opened, and so I couldn't help but get a little emotional and a little teary-eyed. It was just unbelievable and surreal that we were queuing up a line of people to purchase our game, and so that was never forget that unbelievable experience. So anyway, those are probably my two most memorable moments. Both happen to be at Gen Con. I don't know.
Well, Gen Con is a great place to like make the connection. I find out of all the conventions I've been to, it's so well organized and people are so welcoming. At least in my experience, I've never had any issues at Gen Con. And I've come as a volunteer for different booths 2 years in a row. I've come as just a regular attendee as well. I'm hoping to come back again as a demoer or an attendee in the next who knows how many years down the line, as much as I can. Because I try to make it a point now that Gen Con is the one con I book off solid for 2 weeks. Because it's a 14 or 15 hour car drive from Montreal. And last year we were ready and willing and we did it in one shot.
Oh yeah, that sounds like a fun. That's not yeah. I can picture you with like a sign you're holding out that says "On our way to Gen Con" or something like that.
Well, we were actually
nonstop. Yeah.
one of the things we did, because we love the Vagabond from Roots. It's become one of our travel companions when we do conventions now. So we do like a whole, like, we've stopped for Tim Hortons. Here's a picture with the Vagabond from Roots getting coffee. And we've done it with a couple of other well-known plushies from different board games, because I do tend to collect those. And I'm really looking forward to getting any of the other plushies that come out for your games. Just putting it out there.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Can you go through a process of your day in the industry?
Sure, like what a typical day.
Yeah, like a typical day in the office kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, I guess for me, my typical day is, main thing I usually do is I get into the office and I'm usually hitting my emails, right? So a lot of my work comes in through email. So usually it's how many emails I can get through that day, make sure I've caught up on everything. So and then when we're in the office, it's great. These are fond memories now, because remember, it's been a few months that I've been in the office. But when we're in the office, then you've got your coworkers around, so you can always just kind of chat with them a little bit as to what's going on. And so yeah, I mean, it's mainly my job. My role is mainly to network and build relationship with the game distributors, and also to network and build a relationship with retailers. And so it's really actually global, which is really cool, because we actually have retailers that are all over the whole planet Earth. And so it's kind of fun in that way. So I get emails from retailers all over the place, and just kind of helping them out, or they'll have a question or something like that. And so yeah, that's a big part of what I do on a typical day. And then there are times, because I'm at the office, that I will get pulled into doing playtests sometimes, and that's always fun too. So sometimes we're at Leader Games, we do a lot of game development. We spend a lot of time fleshing out and developing our games, and there's a lot of playtesting. And so a lot of times, if I'm at the office, I'll get pulled into doing a playtest of a game as well. So it's great. Yeah.
So is there anything in particular on one of the projects that you've worked on that you wish you had done differently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So this is more from like a team aspect rather than like me personally. But the one thing that I wish we would have done differently is our We have a Vasta Crystal Caverns was kind of our first hit, kind of our first game, and then we came out with a sequel called Vast the Mysterious Manor. And Vast the Mysterious Manor includes miniatures, and it is its own standalone game. But that's the mistake that we made, was it really should have, it's viewed as an expansion to Crystal Cavern, right? So typically you have your base game, and then expansions usually don't sell as well as the base game, because they're expansions. You've got your, some of them sell great, but usually you still don't sell as many copies as the original base game, because you need that base game to play the expansions. And for whatever reason, we've tried our best marketing wise, but I think it's the way that the box looks and everything. People just see it and think, oh, that's an expansion. And so we think that that's really kind of hurt our sales a little bit, but it is its own standalone game. So I would encourage everyone to check it out. And we did spend a lot of time developing that game. It's a wonderful game. It's a dungeon. It's not a dungeon crawl, but you have a paladin who goes adventuring into a haunted manor, trying to see a giant spider that lives there, and there's skeletons that live in the manor, and the one player gets to play the manor itself, which is represented by the Wraith avatar, and Wraith is playing like this puzzle game where they can shift rooms around and rotate the tiles and make these flight patterns to go haunting through the manor. So they're playing like a puzzle game. It's a great game. I could talk more and more about it, but anyway, that's what I wish. I wish we would have. We made a little bit of a marketing mistake with having that being perceived as an expansion rather than a stand.
Yep. So, on average, for you in your particular position, do you see a large ratio of games to final product? Or would that be something like in the team aspect for your company? Do you see a lot of development on games, or is it more specifically you develop one game at a time? Because a lot of different people have given me feedback on how many games that they would be working on at a time versus what actually becomes the final product in the box. So does Leader have the same thing, or do you guys just work specifically on one game, play test it until it's done, publish it, and then work on the next project?
We would be a little more what you just described. We are really kind of see ourselves as a design studio rather than a game publisher. And so we are publishing fewer titles, right? We don't have as many. We're usually doing, in the past, we've done about one a year, and we're kicking it up to maybe doing two a year. And so we put a lot of dedication and time and development into those few titles to make them great. Versus, publishing 5 games and seeing which one is the best out of those 5. So, I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that's perfect.
Kind of what yeah.
So, from a sales standpoint, how has Kickstarter affected how you manage things?
Well, Kickstarter has been a huge part of Leader Games, right? That's really kind of how the company was able to even get started. And so Kickstarter it's been amazing. It's been amazing for us. It's been great. It allows you to reach a lot of people. And if it weren't for Kickstarter, I wouldn't have a job at Leader Games. So yeah, it's been huge. I really think it's really changed the industry at this point, for sure. It allows smaller game companies to go ahead and take a risk. It allows, even from the consumer standpoint, you're able to purchase a game that maybe never would have been published in the past, because maybe you're getting these amazing components that actually cost a lot of money to produce, and it would be super risky to do that. But in Kickstarter, you can say, yes, I want these metal coins to go with my game, or yes, I want this deluxe version, and that's all been made possible by Kickstarter. So I think Kickstarter's great.
Do you have any advice for people who might be launching a campaign on Kickstarter? Are there any particular pitfalls that you've seen in the past with your campaigns?
I don't think I'd really speak to any pitfalls to avoid. And let's see. I would say, like, are you talking from the perspective of like launching your very first Kickstarter, like completely?
It could be your very first launch, or either multiple launches later on, just in general?
Sure. Sure. I would say that I think it's very important to build an audience for yourself as best you can before you go into Kickstarter. Um, I think that's really important. I've seen a lot of companies be successful and where they'll, if you look at some companies that have done like 3 or 4 Kickstarters, you can see growth, right? You can see, oh, well, here was their first Kickstarter. They did a little bit. And now here's their second and third and fourth, and it's growing and growing. And it's because they're building their audience over that time. And so I think that's the biggest advice I could give is just to marketing skill and building an audience is going to be hugely important to have a successful Kickstarter.
Awesome. So, is there any particular projects that you guys are currently working on that you could talk about or plug at this point?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we're super excited. We're going to be publishing a game that's going to be coming out here at the end of August, and it's called Fort. And Fort is the theme of the game is that you're a kid hanging out with your friends. You've got your best friends, and you're gonna eat pizza, collect toys, and your goal is to build the coolest fort. All right. So I think everybody growing up had a best friend, and just about almost everybody built a fort of some kind, whether it was just with cardboard boxes or blankets and pillows and stuff like that. So that's kind of the theme of the game is you're a kid hanging out, and it's a little bit of a deck builder, and it's got some really cool things about it. So uh, it's one of the things that makes it unique, Jen, is it's a deck builder where you're going to want to pay attention to what is in other people's decks because if I'm playing and I take an action, you can follow what I did. So if I take an action with a skateboard, if you discard a skateboard, you can take that same action as well. So if you see that I have a lot of skateboards in my deck, you might want some. And the other cool thing about it is my hand size is 5, and let's say I play 3 of those cards, but 2 of them I did not use, I didn't play. Those go into my yard. And Jen, you could recruit those out of my yard. So if I don't hang out with, if I'm not hanging out with those kids, you might recruit them and they might become your friend and they're going to go over to your deck.
Oh, that's very
Right?
interesting.
Yeah. And so it's very interactive and whatnot. Uh, it, uh, it's got this beautiful iconography. Do you remember the game Race for the Galaxy?
Yes.
It had, the thing about Race for the Galaxy, it had that iconography. And maybe your first game, you're learning what are all these symbols and stuff mean. Fort, we did. Nick was the developer. He spent a ton of time on the iconography for Fort, and most gamers, about halfway through your first game, it's going to click for you, and it just makes the gameplay smooth and really fast. And so, yeah, you're going to be. And Race for the Galaxy was a tableau builder. Fort isn't really a tableau builder, but you can tuck cards into your lookout. And so you can tuck cards in your lookout, and that will help you kind of build or ramp up a little bit. So anyway, that's coming out. It's going to be in retail stores, like I said, right at the end of August. So I encourage people to check that out. And then in the future, during the first quarter of 2021, we're going to be publishing a game called Oath, Chronicles of Empire and Exile. And that is a Cole Worley design. That is a game that remembers. So every time you play the game, the game itself is going to remember something that happened in the last game, and that's going to carry forward into the next one. So it's not a legacy game. It's not a campaign. Players can jump in and out all they want. But if we're playing, Jen, and let's say you win the game, that means in the next game, if you're playing, you get to be Chancellor. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so I was playing and my buddy Nick won and he gets to be Chancellor. I'm like, I want to be Chancellor. So I want to play again right now because I want to try to become the Chancellor.
Well, I'll definitely keep an eye out for Fort up here in Canada. Yeah. I'm not sure how much of a delay there is when it comes to product coming to Canada from the States, especially with everything going on in the world right now. But I'll definitely poke my salesperson at work and be like, hey, put one aside for me.
you should have Fort, like I said, right at the very end of August, early September, you'll have it. So yeah, it'll
Awesome.
be fun.
And so you were saying, I didn't mean to cut you off, so you wanted to be chancellor.
Yeah, yeah. You try to be you can be chancellor if you won the previous game, and then the other thing about it is based on how we're going to look at the state of the game at the end of the game, and there's a deck of cards, and we're going to change the deck for the next game based on what happened. So it's a game that's gonna always kind of remember the history that was forgotten, and your game, Jen, will be very different than mine because based on the games you've played with your game group or whoever you're meeting with to play games, your game is going to evolve and change over time based on what happened. So it's a really fun, cool thing to do. That one, Oath, is going to be out in the first quarter of 2021.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the interview. It was great, and I hope we get to hang out soon at conventions or whenever you're up in Canada or I'm down near you guys. So thank you so much for the interview, and we'll catch everyone next time at the table. Bye.
Good. Thanks, Jen. Bye.